First off, I want to tell you that you are the voice that I hear in my head when I think of the biggest sporting spectacles on the planet. I think of you because I'm 31. I didn't grow up in the era of HBO boxing, of Lampley and Howard Cosell and all those guys that just made boxing feel like the biggest thing on the planet. I associate your voice with the biggest things on the planet, that being UFC. So I'm thrilled to meet you, and I want to give you your flowers as early and as often as possible because I don't think there's anybody better at what you do than what you do.
Well, you've already ruined my question. I was gonna ask Tony actually. Is Jon Anik one of the most legendary names in all of UFC? I think that's an obvious answer, right? Let's just set the base right there. Let's just start on the right foot.
He is a third of the best broadcast team that the UFC has ever put together.
I think any sport across sports, there's not any broadcasting team that I look more forward to listening to.
Wow. Well, thank you guys, and listening to, right? Like we're trying to be as listenable as possible over 7 or 8 hours, 25 times a year for me. So obviously your praise is not lost on me and I appreciate that very much. And certainly to me, it feels like the biggest thing in the world, right? I grew up a rabid Boston sports fan, right? But none of those athletes were fighting, right? Maybe on the ice every now and again, right? But this just feels enormous. Certainly mixed martial arts grabbed me by the balls when I covered my first event in 2007. And, I try to earn that seat every show out. But the one thing that I can always control, I feel like, is my energy. I had a very taxing week, even like the last pay-per-view, my eyes were like fucking shut when I woke up on Saturday. But the one thing I can always control is my energy. So thank you guys for that. We try to earn it every show. But we have worked very hard to try to make the UFC a preeminent live sporting event for television. So thank you guys. We'll try to, earn that praise again Saturday night in London.
Saturday night in London, we've got UFC 286, and we'll get to all of that soon because this is a big one, the trilogy between Kamaru Usman and the champ Leon Rocky Edwards, which is crazy to say because of what we saw happen. That leg kick heard around the world. Obviously you were there for it. Can you put us there at UFC 278 Salt Lake City? I just got back from Salt Lake City for the NBA All-Star game a couple of weeks ago, and we had gotten some press passes and stuff, so we were walking in the building in the confines of Vivint Arena, and I saw they have like kind of in the corner in the middle of nowhere in the stadium, they have Leon's gloves, they have the belt put up, and I walked by and it was like a shrine. I was like, oh my God, this is where they have it in the middle of like a broom closet. Do they not understand what happened here? Can you put us there that night when it happened?
I don't think you just understand what happened here because I'm actually going to take that nugget you just gave me and it's going to make the broadcast this Saturday night. The fact that they have immortalized that moment in Salt Lake City with whatever shrine is outstanding. I'm not necessarily looking for a statue like Karl Malone and John Stockton, right. But seriously, that's great. Like that is absolutely something that can be used on the broadcast. For me, it's like the most memorable moment of 12 years on a UFC microphone.
Wow.
And I have long said, well before Leon Edwards broke through or Alexa Grasso, the most satisfying part of the job is seeing a fighter build themselves up and become a first-time UFC champion. So when you turn that into reality and you do it by beating a long-reigning champion like Kamaru Usman, and then you even up the ante by doing it the way he did it with the last-second Hail Mary type knockout, it's just the perfect storm. But it's like, how much time do you have? I mean, this was a fight that took place at altitude, 4,300 feet, my research tells me this morning, right? How much does that impact Leon Edwards in this rematch, right? The fact that won't be existent. How much did it impact him during rounds 2, 3, and 4 of that second meeting, which were largely listless for him? So there's a ton of questions. Where's Kamaru Usman at this stage of his career? But certainly I think in terms of a singular moment, there's nothing that tops UFC 278 for me and what Leon Edwards was able to do, and quite literally wresting victory from the jaws of defeat.
It was crazy. And I think one of the coolest parts too is I know you guys are doing the broadcast, so you're not always hearing what the corner is saying, but obviously his corner, his coach, talking about, Leon, you got to get it out the fire. Like that to me gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. I've probably heard it 3 times a month since August because it's just like, it even gets me up in my own personal day. I'm like, oh shit, like I got to get out the fucking fire, baby. Like, let's go. So it's so cool. And I don't know when you heard that or what that gave you emotionally, But to me, it's like one of the coolest things in sports.
Yeah, I mean, I heard it later that night, and to your point, I've heard it repurposed dozens of times. And even hearing you do like an okay Dave Lavelle as you just did, it gives me chills still to this day. Some of the best corner work that I've ever heard, just in terms of the urgency in that moment, exactly what their athlete needed to hear at that point in time. And it just feels like a major motion picture. Every inflection from Dave Lavelle. Come on, Leon, yeah, man. I don't.
It could have been in Creed. Creed just came out a couple of days ago. It could have been in Creed, and they would have wrote that. And I would have been like, "Wow, Hollywood did it again! Wow, incredible!"
It is,
but
and
Jon,
I do believe. Go ahead, my man.
Sorry, he quit that fight, right? At some point, when the cameras would cut to his face, you could see just him completely dejected.
Oh, yes.
Sense in the building that
it was 5-0. There's an argument to be made. It was 5-0 going into the 5th round.
Yeah, so most people thought Leon won the first round and got a lot done. But yes, you're right. He was going to lose on the judges' scorecards. And yes, I think the word dejected was what came out of my mouth. I mean, even when I said right before the kick, that's not the cloth from which he is cut, I was saying sort of that's a dejected corner over there. Even the corner started to show some of that dejection. Now, I wouldn't use the word quit. I just think he absolutely put his frustration as to how the fight was going on display for the world to see. And perhaps that's ill-advised. And I also think it's hard for a fighter in a championship setting when you're down on the scorecards. How willing am I to get knocked out, right? Moral victories, that's not Leon's thing, right? I know that sort of became part of the narrative, but that's not his thing. So you just don't know how a guy's going to approach a 5th round in that particular setting. So I don't know, man. It just sort of wrote itself, but we'll see what happens. I mean, for Kamaru Usman, can you imagine the pressure on this dude walking in there Saturday night to try to write this thing?
I was just about to say, looking forward, setting the table for 286. Leon in London, okay? Home country. He's the champ now. Kamaru is coming in off a knockout. He's 35 or 36 years old. I think Leon was talking about it. He had some comments earlier this week talking about how knockouts affect fighters differently. He's older now. He has that in the back of his mind that, hey, wait a second. There's a kick that could be coming my way that I'm not seeing. It's almost like seeing ghosts, right? When you're a quarterback and you're seeing ghosts and you're throwing interceptions, you're like, I don't know. I just saw somebody there that wasn't there. What do you think Usman's going through right now trying to get ready for a title fight?
So I think that the interception analogy is an appropriate one. I don't worry about Kamaru Usman in terms of the preparation, but as the fight gets closer, I mean, certainly when he took those first few shots in training, I'm sure he felt pretty convicted that he could take a shot and that the brain had recovered. But once fight week arrives and all of it gets repurposed over and over again, and he has to continuously, perpetually answer questions about it, you can't avoid it. So I do think that as much championship metal as he has and as mentally forged as he is, it still stands to reason that it's going to be an obstacle that he's going to have to deal with. It's just crazy, man. And I don't have to tell you this, Tony, but he was 15-0 in the UFC, about to break Anderson Silva's record. 90 seconds away. And then everything spins on a dime. It's almost like walking back into your new life, right? As a long reigning champion. So I guess if any athlete that I could think of in the UFC is well equipped to deal with that reality, it's Kamaru Usman. But Teddy Atlas told me today that you get 30% better when you become champion. And even if I would suggest to you that it's 20%, I think Leon Edwards is 20% better than he was walking out of that arena in Salt Lake City. And that is a scary proposition for Usman and everybody else.
Going to the co-main event, we have Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev.
I love you. You just sort of paused as if to say, like, this guy is paid to know how to say it, so maybe I should ask him. I mean,
Fiziev.
How'd you nail it that time?
Because I have it written. I'm looking at a screen right here to my left, and I had it written phonetically. And then when I went to look at it, I lost where it was. How do you do that, by the way? Because I know you have copious amounts of notes. You have a lot of preparation that you go in to every fight. You have to do, God only knows how many, 7 hours, like you said, of fights. When you look at stuff, and then you have to look up to what's happening in the octagon, you look back down and you lose your place. How do you try to like reconcile that and be like, oh shit, I'll ask myself, where the fuck am I?
Well, I'm not blind to the fact that I have missed a lot of big moments I will miss future moments. When Chris Barnett had this crazy knockout of John Vellante at Madison Square Garden, I'm looking down at my notes. My former broadcast partner, Brian Stam, would always say it's an open book test. Might as well show up with some notes, but you do have to be careful. And I'm watching the monitor 90% of the time because that's the view that everybody else is getting back home. So, but as it's hard to not watch the octagon, right? And so there's a lot more distance between my eyes to the monitor and my notes to the octagon. But I guess that's neither here nor there. But in terms of the pronunciations, it's just practice. I have an audio file of every UFC fighter on my phone saying their name. So anyone
them saying it, not even UFC corporate, like the person.
Like Sunday Night Football on NBC,
Yeah.
Devin McCourty, Rutgers or whatever, So yeah, they all say their name to tape. And so respectfully to all of the broadcasters around the world and all of my colleagues, there's really no excuse. You practice, you say it 50 times to yourself. You don't need phonetics come fight night. So spent a lot of time in my hotel room, brother, during fight week.
So we're going to run that back. Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev.
Nailed it.
That's the co-main event. This is the last time we've seen Justin Gaethje since his loss to Charles Oliveira. What was that? 274, where Charles gets stripped of the title, misses weight by a half pound. We see him beat Gaethje. What do you think Gaethje's going to come out looking like? He's fought once in the last year almost.
Yeah, he's lost 2 fights for the undisputed title, sandwiched around an epic win over Michael Chandler, in which he was touched a little bit. But it might surprise your audience to learn that Rafael Fiziev, the lesser-known quantity for a lot of MMA fans, about a 3-1 favorite. He's the guy who's won 6 fights in a row, kicks like a mule, outstanding striker, great cardio, just a willing combatant. I mean, this fight is bulletproof as far as the matchmaking goes. Some might say it's a bad time to be fighting Justin Gaethje, sort of smarting after a couple of championship losses. I would never count out Justin Gaethje, but I would say to you, Tony, that Rafael Fiziev deserves the distinction as the favorite. I do think he's the athlete that is closer to his fighting prime, and he's unblemished since his UFC debut. He's won 6 in a row and deserves the fight and the showcase and everything that comes with it. But Gaethje's game is hell. Gaethje was sort of the most crowd-pleasing fighter in MMA for years and probably still is, but Rafael Fiziev in a lot of respects is that guy now. So we'll see.
Shifting gears here, what's it like being friends with Joe Rogan, such a polarizing figure in today's society?
So I sort of feel like he's universally beloved. Societally, yes, he is polarizing, but to the average American male, this dude is their foremost entertainer, their foremost source of news and information. Sometimes I feel like people in my life know him even better than I do because they ingest his every word on a podcast, and I only get to see him 12 times a year. But this dude is the real article. He is as genuine as it gets. He's certainly the greatest mixed martial arts analyst of all time. It's crazy that he's never been nominated for an Emmy in the United States of America, given how long he's been doing it. I just think it speaks to where the UFC is in its relative infancy relative to these mainstream sports. But make no mistake about it, our imprint has been made. And even if he doesn't get that acknowledgement, you can be sure he doesn't need it. He gets it from the MMA fan base. He gets it from the fighters. And, I've said repeatedly, he'll probably stick around longer than I do. I really think that that there's only one place that he can sort of scratch this particular itch. Like, we feel like we have the greatest job in the world. And hopefully he sticks around because it always feels bigger when he's in the broadcast booth. But I have to just say he's really an even better human being, as trite as that sounds. Like, he's been so good to me from day one. And he worked in a 2-man booth forever. And then all of a sudden it's like, here's a 3-man booth, new play-by-play guy, and Daniel Cormier as well. And you just deal with this. And I just think that he doesn't get enough credit for the way he dealt with all that. So,
well, shifting to Cormier, he hates Jon Jones. Legit.
Yeah. I mean, I think Jon Jones tried to bury the hatchet during this past UFC 285 fight week. And some people don't believe Jon Jones to be a man of integrity, right? So even when he tries to make peace with Daniel Cormier, they don't necessarily feel like it's genuine. Yeah. So it doesn't resonate with them. And I think Daniel's probably of that group. I don't think Daniel really had much time for the niceties and felt like he was cheated in their 2 fights. And, I think the Jones family has really gone to some lengths to try to smooth things over with DC, even after the fight between Jon Jones and Ciryl Gane. Jon Jones's dad actually went over to the side of the octagon and was trying to sort of give Daniel some love. But DC's the ultimate competitor, and I don't think he's lining up to make new friends at this stage of his life.
Speaking of 285, we see Jon after basically a 3-year hiatus from the sport. A lot of questions about his personal life, a lot of questions about him changing camps and coaches, and we see him move up to heavyweight. And obviously, Jon, you know more than anybody the lengths that a body has to go through to go from light heavy to heavyweight, with your speed, with your jiu-jitsu, with your grapple, just with everything that it takes. I believe that Jon is the undisputed GOAT in MMA. I think he proved it against Gane. What did you see Octagon side? What did you see in the week leading up to the fight about Jon Jones, the fight itself, and how everything is kind of played out?
Well, I didn't see enough of him in the fight to think that he deserves the distinction as a 3-1 favorite over Stipe Miocic were they to fight in July or shortly thereafter. But he could not have handled this fight week any better in terms of every stroke, with the media, with us in the fighter meeting, with the fight itself. He felt the love, and I think he deserves a lot of that adulation. Certainly he has been his own worst enemy for much of his mixed martial arts career. But the most basic human need is to feel appreciated, and Jon Jones has made a lot of people feel good over the years. Even in his formative UFC years, he's always made other human beings feel good, human beings on our staff, fight fans. So as far as that part of it that you asked about, flying colors. As far as the in-octagon stuff, I expected him to look a little bit more muscular. Now, people suggest I'm leaning too much into that, and that's fine. I think he's going to look better for the Stipe fight. But on the feet, I don't know, man. I wonder how he really felt in that limited amount of competition time. I just think it's going to be hard for him competing on the feet as a heavyweight long term to find that comfortability that he had as a light heavyweight. So I don't think he should be 3-1 favorite over Stipe Miocic, but deserves the distinction as the favorite. And I'm happy for Jon. I really am. There's a whole other Ciryl Gane side of this in terms of how seemingly ill-prepared he was after 14 months removed from the Ngannou fight. But you're right. I mean, let's give Johnny Bones his flowers.
I mean, it looked to me like Gane, they locked that octagon. He looked across and he said, holy shit, that's Jon Jones. What am I doing in the same pool with this guy? Like, this guy is a killer. And he fought like it, right? Like, in 2 minutes, you go not one guillotine, but 2 guillotine chokes, and the fight's over. And you guys it looked like you, Joe, and DC were like, wait, what just happened? We just switched camera shots. Like, what? He tapped? What happened? So that, to me, like, we do a live watch party every pay-per-view. And I love when you come in and say, Dateline, Las Vegas, or whatever the city is. Yeah. One of the coolest things you do. But I remember watching, me and Lewis were doing the show, and all of a sudden it's like that first guillotine. I'm like, okay, like this is not good for him. He kind of readjusts, gets the second one, taps out, and I was like, I thought we were going to see so much more from Ciryl Gane. The one strike that he got was a groin shot 8 seconds into the fight. That was it.
Yeah, his performance left a lot to be desired. And I think you're right. There was some sort of moment when he got into the octagon of intimidation or otherwise. But I really feel like a lot of that might just have been rooted in the preparation or lack thereof, or lack of strides being made during the preparation, not enough wrestling and grappling repetitions and rounds with like big bodies. I know there's been a lot of venom directed at Ciryl Gane since this fight, but you don't get better in those areas incrementally by not putting in the time when you're not in training camp. And I'm not sure he's all that willing in that capacity. So we'll see how he builds up from here, but you can be sure like Stipe is going to be a totally different challenge for Jon Jones. And that's going to bring out the best of Jon, I think, in training. So
when you say that, you made a comment right now about his preparation and him being ill prepared, like, there's a video circulating of Jon Jones actually training with somebody, and the trainer does the exact same, well, to a degree, guillotine that he deployed.
Henry Cejudo, world champion, Triple C, like fighting bantamweight championship in a little bit.
So my question is this, you've been doing this for a long time, is it seemingly obvious to the eyes when you see someone just that ill prepared? Did you anticipate, like, can you as a professional see that within the first 30 seconds, a minute of a fight and identify it?
It's a good question. So not in this particular sequence. And even for guys who have much more trained eyes than I do, Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier, they're still trying to navigate this, trying to figure out how Ciryl Gane is going about defending this choke. Jon makes the adjustment, which in theory gave Gane an opportunity to get out, and sort of didn't necessarily have the want at that point to try to be desperate or urgent. But Jon Jones essentially undressed Ciryl Gane in the lead up to this fight in terms of the preparation. He's got the cleanest gym in the world, clean gym clothes, no big training partners. And I'm thinking to myself, that can't all be true, right? I mean, when you get manhandled, and that's probably the wrong verb, but when you get out wrestled by Francis Ngannou, and then you've had 14 months to methodically shore that up, we know what you can do on the feet. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like he was necessarily doing that. And it's hard for me from my seat to be as critical as maybe guys who are paid to editorialize or analysts. But I don't know. I also think, as happy as I am for Jon, the three of us were hunkering down to watch a UFC heavyweight championship fight, and it felt like it was over before it started.
Yeah.
Valentina Shevchenko, Alexa Grasso. I always love also watching the reaction shots of you guys when the camera pans over, Grasso has her in the rear naked choke, and you guys realize, oh my God, this is over. Valentina was, I think I have this right, she is the #1 defending champion on the women's side of UFC. I don't think there's anybody that has more defending titles than her, right?
Yeah, I don't think any woman has defended a singular belt as many times as her. Nunes might be close in the totality, but I think you're right.
When Alexa Grasso started that fight, and she was throwing absolute cinder blocks to Valentina Shevchenko, I was like, oh my God, wait a second, like there's something here. And I think she was like a plus 600 and some odd underdog on DraftKings, our soulmates at DraftKings. I was very surprised to see what had happened to Valentina. Can you give us a little perspective on that fight?
Well, I think in some respects, Alexa Grasso happened to Valentina Shevchenko, and a lot of her confidence is rooted in her preparation, not just the preparation that she maximized in that fight-ending sequence, something she had seen before and drilled before as recently as in the locker room before the fight, but just the overall magnitude of her preparation and her conditioning and her UFC body of work from a boxer to a 5-tool player in mixed martial arts. She's been putting in the time with the wrestling and the grappling, right? She fought Carla Esparza and Tatiana Suarez 2018, 2019. Toughest wrestler she can fight at strawweight, right? And those fights didn't go particularly well. So you go one of two ways. She leaned into the preparation and the improvement. So when her title fight materialized, she was ready and she busted through the goddamn door.
Is Rakhmonov a crazy person?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard, right? We have an interpreter. So
I
like,
say that not
things
good
get
as
lost
an
in
antics
translation.
after the fight. I was watching him in the fight, and you could see that, not that he would get bored, but he was like, come on, like hit me in the face. Like he liked getting hit. And there's a point where he smiled at Jeff, and you're just punching each other in the face, and he's just smiling like, okay, this is a good fight. Like, I'm enjoying this. That's crazy though, right? Like no one likes to get hit in the face.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that, right? Khamzat Chimaev, when he came into the UFC in our first fighter meeting, said, I'm looking for a war, right? I want that legendary
Khamzat's
war.
built different, though.
No, but Shavkat Rakhmonov, 16-0 with 16 finishes. These guys are very much cut from the same cloth. They go through everybody like a hot knife through butter. They want that type of challenge. They want to be bloodied, to see how they'll respond to adversity, to be in a war, to be in a Hall of Fame type fight. Like Khamzat Chimaev, I'm not saying he willed that fight with Gilbert Burns to happen, but that fight's going to end up in the goddamn UFC Hall of Fame, even if Chimaev doesn't become a UFC champion and get into the Hall of Fame on his own merit. So he was craving that. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of crazy in the best of ways for Shavkat Rakhmonov, and I do think it stands to reason that won't happen in his next fight because his coaches and his management will try to steer him against that. But I do think he was sort of looking for a fight. And he got one.
Yeah, he definitely liked it.
No doubt.
Sorry, like
He definitely liked it. That's a great
No doubt.
line. We've talked about Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 2 being in one of your best fights of all time. Can you give us a top 3 Jon Anik's best fights of all time that you've been calling, that you sat there and you were like, oh my God, I can't believe I just saw
that you've
this.
called specifically?
Well, yeah, I'll give you moments, right? So the greatest heavyweight fight of all time, Brisbane, Australia, Mark Hunt versus Antonio Bigfoot Silva. I would encourage people to go to UFC Fight Pass. I believe it was December 7th, 2013, Brisbane Entertainment Center, greatest heavyweight fight of all time. When Rose Namajunas knocked out Joanna Jędrzejczyk to become the UFC Women's Strawweight Champion, I think that is as shocking a moment as we've had in the booth. And I thought the Thug Rose call will withstand the test of time. Shout out to my guy Daniel Cormier on that. I already mentioned Leon Edwards, so I will give you a fourth. Khabib Nurmagomedov retiring in the octagon at 29-0 was just bananas for me, right? Because nobody was expectant that that was going to happen. Not DC, 2 seats down from me. And the night I made my debut on a UFC microphone, January 20th, 2012 in Nashville, Tennessee, was Khabib's UFC debut. And there was some nostalgia there for me. There always has been with Khabib. And then I'm in that moment on Fight Island, which felt surreal in and of itself. And then he starts retiring in the octagon. And that moment for me will always be special, albeit a little bit shocking in the moment. So
when he retires, it's happening in front of you, or they tell you like, hey, like after the match, he's going to retire? Like,
no, he's taking off his gloves in the octagon while I have my left hand on his shoulder and a microphone in his face. And certainly DC wouldn't have given me a heads up if he knew that that was his mother's directive that he retire after that fight. But no, the narrative right thereafter, if you recall, immediately became full throttle, full court press from Dana White trying to get this guy back for a 30th fight. So, I thought that maybe that night would become progressively less special as time went on, but I think he's done. We'll see.
Is he combined between fighter and coach? Will he be the best coach of all time, Khabib?
If he was committed to that cause, I would think so, right? Just hearing Bilal Muhammad and some of these other guys swear by his value on fight night. And you even see it with my guy, Ray Longo, who's on our podcast every week. He didn't train Merab Dvalishvili a single moment for that fight last weekend, right? But you could be sure he wants him as his chief corner come fight night. Some guys have such value that even if they're not there every step of the way for 8 weeks, you want them in the corner on fight night. So yeah, I think Khabib, with a combination of his corner ability and 29-0, certainly an all-time great. Didn't have nearly as many title defenses nor title fights as some of the guys that we put on the Mount Rushmore as pure fighters, but I don't know that anyone has more to offer the sport than Khabib Nurmagomedov.
The UFC has been on fire matchmaking as far as the fights that they've put out in 2023. I thought 2022 was excellent. We were actually at the UFC 281, I think in New York. What was 281 or 282? 281 in New York. Chandler versus Dustin Poirier was incredible. Pereira versus Izzy was incredible. We were there in the building for that. And it just feels like there's nothing like that Madison Square Garden card. The place is electric. The fights are always incredible. What's the one fight that you're looking forward to in 23 that could match the intensity that we saw there?
Bro, do you know what we got going on this weekend?
Yeah, yes, I do.
Right? It may sound like a cop-out, right? I live in South Florida, so I could certainly
As do we. We're in Miami, so we will be in the building for 287, George Masvidal versus Gilbert Burns and Izzy versus Pereira 2.
Yeah, so for me, it's like Miami-Dade Arena, right? I live in West Boca Raton. That's a home game for me. I've been trying to get the UFC to Miami for 12 years. And I'm not talking Fort Lauderdale. I'm not talking Hollywood. I'm not talking Jacksonville.
We're talking about Biscayne Bay Drive right there. Exactly. Right out the Freedom Tower.
So that whole event, I don't even care who's fighting, but bro, Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman 3 this weekend. They're calling it the single biggest fight in the history of UK mixed martial arts. So I'm literally packing my suitcase and leaving here in like 2 hours. So
really,
here we go. Yeah.
I love the prep work, baby. You're gonna be in the studio cooking up the first opening monologue, which are always awesome. I can't wait, man. 286 is gonna be an absolute movie. Let's do a couple things first. Anik and Florian, the podcast. Tell the good people about it. It's an awesome podcast. Kenny, Florian, yourself. Let us know what's good.
We're twice a week on the DraftKings YouTube channel, which is a pivot from last year on the Anik and Florian podcast YouTube channel. But all full episodes on the DraftKings YouTube channel. It's also, of course, available on the audio front. And it gives me a chance to pick Ken Flo's brain every week, which is something that I used to get to do on a UFC microphone, and I don't anymore. So that's pretty exciting. So thank you for that.
And the shirt you have on. We need to talk about that because I need to get one of those too. That's the Phoenix one I can see. We've got the London one, the UK one coming out with the the white, red, and blue. Talk to me about one more sleep.
Now that I know you guys are in Miami, I didn't know if both of you were in Miami.
Yes,
You're making
me
nervous. So I rejected the first Miami design. Okay. So we're sitting here trying to figure out, like, my twin brother is my resource, and he just wanted something a little bit maybe more Miami Vice, right? So I'm certainly working with something
like this right here over my left shoulder.
I'm telling you,
yes. Pink,
so pink is part of the initial design, but we went with the soft reject, the first One More Sleep Miami design. But yeah, all of the city themed designs people really seem to gravitate towards, and hopefully you guys.
Where can they get
Miami ones?
Where can they get that?
Millions.co is the website, but I'm getting shirts for you guys for Miami. So maybe you can pretend to like the design, whatever it is. You text me.
I will love the design. I'll wear it to the fight. How about that?
My man.
Yeah, I did have one more question. Can you define soft reject? I like that phrase, and I think you made it up.
It's kind of like
all right. So you guys are actually getting some stuff that I don't necessarily reveal because you ask good fucking questions. So basically, when I get a new design from Millions, it'll say approve or deny, right? So a hard rejection would be approve or reject. Hard rejection would be if I just click that button. Soft rejection would be follow up with my lovely salesperson and say, hey, this one we might go with this, but I'm thinking we could just tweak this a little bit. Maybe Miami Vice it, and she agreed. But it's hard because rejecting designs, you have designers who everybody has feelings, right? It's hard, but sometimes you got to lay down the law.
I broke into the industry as a designer, and that's why I no longer design.
You don't want to have your heart broken? Is that what it is?
It's too much rejection, and it's like art, and I'm like, you know what? It's personal.
It's never personal. It's just
business,
it's
tough,
buddy.
Right? I mean, it took me a while. I'm much older than you guys to thicken up my skin to the point where I really am largely unfazed. I'll take the constructive criticism all day, but things like that where people don't like my ideas or things like that, I've grown enough of a skin where it doesn't bother me anymore. But it's a hard thing, man. It really is.
He's the voice of a generation, the voice when I think of the biggest events in sports. Jon Anik. Again, go listen to Anik and Florian on the DraftKings YouTube channel. We are also on the DraftKings YouTube channel. If you ever see something happen with
family,
with fantasy football, you ever see some weird mugs on the TV, it's usually us trying to make something happen. So check out Anik and Florian. That's an awesome pod. Check out One More Sleep. You can find that at millions.co. It's obviously on your social media too, at Twitter Jon_Anik, and also on your IG page. Jon, we appreciate it so much. You're a legend. We want to always give you your flowers because you're the best at what you do. Thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Hey, I appreciate you guys more than you know. I hope to shake your hands in Miami, and maybe we'll chop it up again either on the front end at 287 or after it all goes down. But thank you guys for the support. It means a lot.